Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is my friend Alan Collins. Alan is head of the student. He's the founder of the student loan debt. I'm sorry. Uh, Name your group.
Student loan justice. Let
Yes,
me get out of my banner here.
yes. And the news came down yesterday that Biden is offering the $10,000 loan forgiveness for student loan borrowers, and Alan doesn't think that really addresses the issue. So we're going to talk about this and the reaction of the people so far as since yesterday. So Alan, Biden came up with the $10,000 loan forgiveness um, program, right?
Yeah, that's right. So the announcement yesterday, and it's not 10,000, by the way. It's up to 10,000 for across the board cancellation. Also, up to 20,000 for people who received the Pell Grant when they were in college. That is the claim. But Cynthia, I'm here to tell you, I read the announcement carefully, and it is vague, ambiguous, and frankly, it looks a lot like a trick to me. There are any number of ways that the wording of that application can be exploited by the Department of Education to not cancel loans. The Department of Education has a long history of bureaucratizing loan cancellation plans to death. For example, all the income driven repayment plans that we're hearing about today, cumulatively, they have a disqualification rate of 99%. So the
Yeah.
Department of Education will find ways to get people to fall through the cracks during, the application process, through means testing, through income verification, and this new wrinkle with Pell. It could be quite extraordinarily hard for people to prove that they got the Pell Grant, particularly for older people who were in colleges years or decades ago. So, and again, the wording of this cancellation, it wasn't $10,000 across the board. It was up to $10,000. We don't know what that means. The Department of Education has given no further details on what that does mean. But I'm here to tell you, Cynthia, I've been looking at this program, the federal lending program, the Department of Education, for nearly 18 years now. And this has all the hallmarks of being just another loan cancellation gimmick, where, quite frankly, it wouldn't surprise me if not even 25%, probably less, of the borrowers actually get any kind of loan cancellation. And I would bet that the average amount forgiven for those who actually do get the cancellation is going to be way less than $10,000. It'll be at most probably half that, but probably less. So we're talking about, in sum total, um, in all likelihood, in my best guess would be, we're going to forgive less than $50 billion in student loan debt as a result of this action. And remember, Cynthia, this is for a lending portfolio that grows by $100 billion every year in interest alone. So I'm not impressed, and none of the people that I've seen in our group are impressed either. And let's face it, the worst hurt borrowers tend to be older people who have seen, a $10,000, $20,000 loan explode to over $100,000, or, up to $250,000 or even more with penalties and fees and so forth. $10,000, even if it was 10,000, which it won't be, but even if it was $10,000, that does nothing for these borrowers. You know, uh, One of our members said, they may as well just add 10,000 onto my balance. It just makes no difference to him.
So it's just so astounding. When do you think that people who have borrowed money, when do you think they will feel the total impact of this, kind of gimmick, as you say?
Nobody's gonna realize how good or bad it is. It'll be bad. Nobody's gonna realize it till way after the election. It's gonna be There's going to be an application process, and the department hasn't even unveiled that application, and they say that they'll get it out in the coming weeks. Um, they say they will definitely have it out by the end of the year. So the November elections are going to be come and gone by then. And, this has really all the hallmarks of just a tricky, shameless political ploy by the Biden administration. Pretty
So,
much par for the course for Biden, by the way. Before the election, he was saying things like, if you earn less than $125,000 a year, I'm going to eliminate your student loan debt, is what he said. So Biden has a shameful track record of making grand promises and then doing little or nothing.
so do you think that what he said yesterday will enable the Democrats to win, to keep the majority in both houses?
I think it will help the Democrats. Very few people really know much about, including borrowers, really know much about student loans in the first place. So, um, I think they scored some pretty solid points with with all student loan borrowers out there who don't know any better. Do I think it's enough to get past the political headwinds they face? I doubt it, Cynthia. I doubt it. Uh, you know, the Democrats had a very serious headwind to deal with this coming November. So, and I'm no expert on abortion, but I suspect the abortion issue will probably help them a little bit. This current student loan action will help them somewhat, but I sort of doubt that this is significant enough, even as advertised, to really compel huge numbers of voters to go for the Democrats this time. Because remember, in 2020, Biden made some huge promises, and he just barely eked out that election. States like Georgia, Michigan was close. Many states that are being absolutely devastated by student loan debt. The 42 million distressed student loan borrowers were the reason the Biden and the Democrats won that election. And I think all of those distressed people were essentially livid with the Democrats as of the day before yesterday. I don't think yesterday's announcement brings nearly all of them back, probably less than a third. If the Democrats really want to be taken seriously again here in November, they will do something meaningful on student loans, not what we saw yesterday. The minimum that the Democrats really should do, and they are in a great position to do, is return bankruptcy protections to the loans. The founding fathers called for uniform bankruptcy laws that had the power to declare war and raise an army in the Constitution. It's been uniquely stripped from student loans.
Mhm.
And well, nobody wants to file for bankruptcy. I think everybody understands that we've got to have that sort of at least basic floor of fairness, that floor of leverage that you need, which bankruptcy provides. So I think the Democrats' best move right now is passing a bill that's in the Senate, S-2598. It's a bipartisan bill. It returns bankruptcy protections to federal student loans, and it claws money back from the colleges. So this
And
bill, I think, do well.
and only two Republicans sponsored it, right?
Well, yeah, there's only three co-sponsors on the bill. Dick Durbin is the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. He's not really going out seeking co-sponsors very hard at all. But even still, he's got two Republican senators, Josh Hawley, who's a pretty hardcore MAGA guy, and also John Cornyn, who's more of a sort of an old school Republican guy from Texas. So the bill is in a perfect position to pass right now. Quite frankly, I think it would pass the Senate with way more than 60 votes. We've heard Republicans from many different places say nice things about the bill, and more broadly, propose and endorse at least the concept of returning bankruptcy protections to student loans. So
My
anybody out there with student loans, you need to be pushing for S-2598 because time is getting really short. This bill's got to pass by the end of the year. And if the Democrats want to get anything out of it politically, they need to get it done before early voting begins.
so tell everybody what the average person who is strapped with debt, what can they or cannot do? In other words, are they able to buy a house? Are they able to buy a nice car? What does this financial strain mean to these people?
Well, even before the pandemic, Cynthia, about 85% of all federal student loan borrowers were underwater on their loans. So more than half of them were not paying at all. And this is before the pandemic. Another 30 or so percent were paying and paying and paying, but their loan balances were going up. So 85% of the student loan borrowers out there were losing sleep over their loans even before the pandemic. Yeah, they many of them weren't able to, buy homes, start businesses, and do some, very basic things that people do as life goes on. So this is a very important issue to those people. That's my best estimate is around 42 million distressed student loan borrowers, both federal and private loans. That's a lot of people, Cynthia, and we vote. Make no mistake, I'm a distressed borrower, just like those 42 million people.
So let me ask you this: if people in 2020, if they believed, did not believe what Biden was saying, do you think Trump would have easily won the election?
Oh, easily, without a doubt. There were so many close races. Nevada, Georgia, Michigan, all of those states, student loan debt exceeds the entire state budget in those states. So in Georgia, there was over 2 million people that were absolutely wrecked by student loans. In Nevada, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but it's huge, far more than enough to change the outcome of those elections. Pennsylvania, same thing. So, we distressed student loan borrowers, Cynthia, we are the largest politically untethered voting bloc in the country. In fact, in the history of the country, 42 million people is nearly enough to elect a president outright. So, um,
Okay, Biden has never really worked with you guys. He's never really cared about this issue. And ultimately, what do you think? If people feel that they've been duped, how many times can people feel duped before they start to do something about it? What do you think?
well, that remains to be seen, Cynthia. I would have thought and hoped, I've been doing this for 18, 17, 18 years now. I would have hoped that people were ready to, march on Washington, D.C. back in 2006. But, debt is a very tricky thing. It's a very effective way to keep people subdued and quiet and demoralized and sort of walking around with their tail in between their legs. But I think we've reached the breaking point. Quite frankly, the lending system is finished. The numbers are just too outrageous, even compared to any other lending system in U.S. history. Subprime home mortgages, the S&L crisis. We've never seen a lending system as failed as the federal student loan system. And I think the pandemic was the nail in the coffin. Before the pandemic, as I said, most people weren't paying on their loans. But here now, during this COVID emergency, almost nobody's paying. And whenever they try and turn the lending system back on, and oh, by the way, the announcement yesterday made it clear that repayments will resume January 1st, 2023. Very few people are going to resume making payments on their federal student loans in 2023. I don't see it. In fact, I would be stunned if even 25% of the borrowers resume paying. I think it'll be far less than that, something like 20%, maybe 15.
Biden,
So I think that breaking point is happening, but if you're waiting to see people, a million man march in Washington, D.C., I don't think we're going to see that, but we will see a massive payment stoppage.
Biden's got to know the reaction of the people, right?
Um, Biden has a history with the student loan. I call it the student loan swamp, Cynthia. Going back to his days as a junior senator from Delaware in the 70s. he was a surprisingly key guy in getting bankruptcy initially restricted for federal student loans. And he was a very key guy in getting bankruptcy removed from private student loans in 2005. So I don't know how deep Biden's ties go with the student loan industry, but I know they go very deep.
Now,
And
how
so
much money? How much money over the years do you think that Biden has received from the student loan debt industry towards his campaigns?
good question. I've actually never looked closely. I'm sure it's been very significant. I'm sure his with his long career, it's been, in the millions of dollars without a doubt. Um, but even just small things like after that 2005 legislation passed, a few years after that, Sally Mae relocated their corporate headquarters to Delaware, and Albert Lord and Joe Biden, they did a live press junket on CNBC to announce this move. And you could just tell by the body language that these two guys were old friends. I've heard rumors that Joe Biden is a regular on Albert Lord's private luxury golf course in Anne Arundel, Maryland. That sort of thing. I think it goes very deep with Biden.
So, what can people expect?
Well, the announcement yesterday was so vague and ambiguous. It's hard to make any real plans. They can expect that there will be an application and that it will be a very convoluted, confusing applications with many ways to screw it up so that, they can throw your application in the trash. I think that's a pretty fair bet. They can expect that they won't find anything out for months, if not years. The Department of Education is just famously good at slow walking these applications, only approving them, in sort of piecemeal fashion. Um, it just looks like another huge paper tiger to me, Cynthia, and nobody should be super impressed. As I said, if the Democrats really want to impress us, they'll return bankruptcy to the loans. That's a very simple legislative thing to do. There's a bill ready to be passed. It requires no congressional approval, requires no congressional appropriation, adds nothing to the national debt. This could be done tomorrow. And I think the longer and the more people like me and other borrowers are feeling like we're being manipulated and toyed with and teased, I think the less they're going to be inclined to vote for Democrats. And I'm really sorry to have to say that. But we'll see. The only thing that I can maybe say on the other side of that is that the Republicans appear to be trying very hard to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, certainly on the student loan issue. It is really, they've been tricked, frankly. The Republicans have been tricked onto the other side of this issue where they're wagging their finger at the borrowers. And let me tell you, Cynthia, half of those people with student loans are either Republican or independent. So the Republicans are insulting student loan borrowers at their great peril. There are huge numbers of votes involved here.
I recently saw Howard Dean on TV, and he said that the student loan debt issue will be a major issue for the midterms. So, that was
Absolutely, it will. You point to any issue, healthcare or abortion or gun control or immigration. I will show you an issue around which the political battle lines are very clearly drawn, and
Mhm.
people have already made up their minds on that issue years ago, and they're not changing much. With student loans, it's the Wild West. Neither party has effectively gotten their arms around this issue, and 42 million people who are losing sleep at night, they will vote a party they're not inclined to vote for if that party actually puts something trustworthy on the table for them. So Joe Biden did that last session, but he's broken that bond. He's lost trust. The announcement yesterday, I don't think it even goes a quarter of the way to restoring that trust.
So, what do you think that the burden of debt on people because of student loans. What do you think it's done to the economy?
Oh, I think it's been a wet blanket on the economy for years and years and decades. You want to talk about inflation. A huge cause of inflation are, doctors, nurses, other people, even teachers who they have to make $100,000 a year. Doctors probably have to make $250,000 a year just to pay their student loan debt. Could you imagine if all the doctors with $300,000 in student loan debt hanging around their necks, if they were freed of that burden, well, they could work for far less. They could work for 100,000 a year instead of $250,000 a year. That is a very hidden cause of inflation that people don't realize. Um, so canceling student loans, by the way, will not cause inflation. It will canceling student loans will not inject spendable money into the economy that will cause inflation. That's one of the talking points of the Republicans that is just maddeningly wrong.
Well, when I saw, the $10,000 forgiveness, some people on social media were saying, "Well, I paid my debt off, so everybody should pay their debt off." What do you think of that argument?
I think people who paid off their student loans in years or decades past, they should be very glad to be done. This is no longer their problem. The problem today, right now in 2022, is that 85% of everybody, even before the pandemic, were never going to be able to repay their loans. So while I might have some empathy for people who maybe recently repaid, this is no longer their problem. And their pain in the past is no justification for allowing 42 million people to be wrecked for the rest of their lives. No argument there.
So, as this unfolds and people realize what exactly the truth is, besides the pushing for the bankruptcy bill, what should they be doing?
It all comes down to bankruptcy, Cynthia. As we've seen, we're not going to see any meaningful cancellation from Joe Biden unless and until we get the threat of bankruptcy returned. Beyond that, in my humble opinion, nobody should ever pay another dime into this federal student loan beast. I know everybody's going to make their own decisions, but quite frankly, in my humble opinion, paying any more money into this dangerous beast, it's not only probably unwise because this lending system is just so failed and almost nobody is going to pay going forward. In my humble view, it's unpatriotic. It does no good for the borrowers. It does no good for the country to pay into this failed catastrophe. And frankly, if they can do to other loans what they did to student loans by removing bankruptcy rights, they will. And there's a lot of people that would like to. This is the camel's nose under the tent. John Adams said many years ago, there are two ways to conquer and enslave a country. One is by the sword, but the other is by debt, he said. And how true that is. We are looking down the barrel of that gun. They would love to take bankruptcy away from medical debt, away from credit cards, you name it. There's no limit to where they can take this if this student loan injustice is allowed to stand and prevail and spread.
And so, as this issue becomes, as it evolves, I would love to have you on Issues That Matter and talk about the evolution of what's going to happen. Would you do that?
Yeah, I'd love to. Things are happening quick.
Okay. So you've been listening to Alan Collins, head of student loan debt justice. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Issues That Matter. And if you like this show, subscribe to my YouTube page. Alan, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a great day.